Tonight we're going to talk about dating. So let's start. I want to ask you, since you deal with so many students, can you tell me a little bit about what's the dating scene in college? What do you see?
So I'll give you like a 20-year zoom out view. When we first arrived on campus, I was all of 21 years old. So I was the same age as the seniors. I could just like legally drink. And my husband was 23.
And you've been there for 20 years.
Plus. And what was very interesting was back then, very often we would see people like a young guy, a young lady, come on in together, spend Shabbos dinner, whatever the event was, and leave together. And no one made any fanfare, but when you see people coming and going together, after a while, you just get the memo. They're dating, they're seeing each other, whatever the vernacular was, that they're like a couple. And it was pretty common. You saw lots of those. Sometimes 6 months would go by and you wouldn't see them together anymore. Sometimes, a student I wouldn't see for a while, and I'd reach out like, hey, and they would say, oh, like, I'm not so comfortable right now because of the relationship, ending. And now, everyone's giving each other space. But it was very common. This is like 2000 when we started up at Emory. And it seemed very normal. What has progressed over 2 decades plus is it's less and less common. I won't bring you up to the current day, but it became less and less common to find couples who were dating. It still always existed, but the number, the percentage, or how many people were actually in serious, definable relationships, however they chose to define it, went from being like a good percentage of the population to dwindling. And obviously there's a ton of different sociological, psychological, like factors that influence why, in our environment and in our culture that would happen. But in the last, I would say, bringing us from like 2015 up to like the pandemic, I would say probably it was extremely rare to see anyone in a serious relationship, and mostly the vernacular, the type of relationships that students, I didn't even think they would call them relationships, but it was like a hookup culture where there's no commitment, there's no investment. If I don't know your name the next day, it's also fine. And really, you saw that people were more and more comfortable, more and more uncomfortable interacting with each other unless they're drunk or high or on some substance that is, they're not as inhibited. And I was like, this is such a problem.
Yeah.
And then I would say went from this culture of hookup where everybody's just kind of, it's not even friends with benefits because there's no friendship. So it's just benefits or not benefits. Obviously, Me Too movement was going strong at that point as well. And then we moved right from that to like Tinder swiping, where it wasn't even people in your community or people you knew or had class with or whatever. And what's very fascinating about it to us is my husband have had countless like students, nice young Jewish guys from wherever, Manhattan and, Miami and wherever else, tell him like, it's awful because it's so easy. And I'm like, I can't stop. I'm doing this, but like, I feel so empty inside. And like, I want more and I want different, but like, obviously the thrills and the benefits are there. And so I'm taking advantage of this, but like, at the end of the day, I'm like, it's like ordering pizza and it's a disaster.
You get sick of ordering too many pizzas.
Yes. And it's not a disaster because like, oh, the rabbi, the Rebbetzin don't approve of this lifestyle. It's like, no, the people in this cultural dynamic, I wouldn't say want out universally or there would be a big exodus, but at a certain point, I was like, wow, we could only go uphill from here. Meaning we could only improve. We could only do better. We could only give people more tools and resources and structures from their own heritage to help navigate this cultural disaster. There's nothing intimate about any of these encounters, and no one walks away feeling closer to anyone else because of them. And it's like the opposite of anything positive that's supposed to come from these types of exchanges. People feel isolated and stressed and anxious and alone, but yet it's not that they're not interacting, it's the way they're interacting, and the damage is felt and seen and observed by everybody. It's not like, oh, if you have a different traditional approach, then this is a different way. And it was very fascinating for us to hear from students over the years, seeing how things were going, saying like, something's gotta change, like something's gotta give. So that's kind of like how things, and that was till the pandemic. And the pandemic, I think, took things even to a more dismal place where like there's almost no interaction of any type.
So it's very rare to see couples.
Yeah. Like when someone's like, oh, my boyfriend, I'm like, mazel tov. Like it's like a celebration because you're in a relationship and that's healthy.
Right.
And it's positive and it's good. And it means you're learning skills and you're getting to know someone and you care about someone. And like, it's such a good thing, but I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it's like a small percentage. And also what's interesting is couples on campus, meaning there's a guy and a girl who are dating, their friends or even their family are like, right now is not the time for this like committed relationship. Like we had parents' weekend this Friday night, like 250 families. And one of the moms was telling me her daughter's dating a guy. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, this is like I'm not saying success. I don't know where it's going, but
it's positive.
Like, it's wonderful. Her mom was like, yeah, like we like him. He's a nice guy, but like she's a little young to be in a serious relationship. And I was like, that's not good advice.
Right.
Because no one knows what will happen, where it will go. And no one needs any pressure that it needs to do or be anything. But like to say like investing in getting to know someone and learning how to be in a relationship is not the right time. But it actually, I think that it actually the whole age in our culture of when people go into that mindset where they want to be in a serious relationship has probably moved up at, for sure, a half a decade, maybe even a full one.
Is it that they don't want to be in a relationship or they don't know how to be in a relationship, how to start a relationship?
So I always laugh because I'm like, for 20 years, I feel like I have a lab. And I'm like, in my lab where I observe I have my social experiments. I don't document so well. It's all anecdotal, but I have a lot of like evidence, real life evidence. And I used to always, every semester, I always did either relationship course or relationship class, or even a Sinai Scholars class on relationships. And I would always start the class the same way with a question, right? Get people engaged. What was the question? If you're in a relationship, raise your hand. So depending on which decade we're talking about, how many hands in the room would go up. Usually it's, if there's 10 people, maybe 2 or 3, because I'm saying it's like a small.
Right.
And then my follow-up question would be like, if you're not currently in a relationship, but in theory would like to be, if the right person came along, raise your hand. And the rest of the room would raise their hand with maybe one exception. And what's fascinating is the last few years when I asked that same series of 3 questions, if you're in a relationship, let me know if would be open to being one or would like that, or that sounds nice, raise your hand. And if you're not raising your hand for I'm in one or I want to be in one, then, there's always someone.
Right.
The numbers are insane because the last time we did this, I would say half of the room, I was like, wait, you're not in a relationship, you don't want to be in one. And they're like, yeah. So this is like a post-pandemic thing. Like it's not even on my radar right now. And they're the same biological age.
Right.
But developmentally, I think there's something's taking longer to develop. You could point to 101 things why that is. Technology, people interacting on a screen instead of in person. So you don't pick up social cues. Yeah. I had this girl during finals last year. I was having coffee with a student and whatever, we're sitting down. How are you? How's your week going? Stress, blah, blah, blah. And she says to me like, oh, my 3 roommates all went out for brunch without me. They didn't invite me. And I just saw on Instagram, the avocado toast or whatever they posted. And she was very hurt and upset because they didn't even let her know. Yeah. She was studying for the LSATs. So she's telling me this and she looks like upset. And her friend, obviously realizing, oh gosh, we posted a picture that we're all at brunch and she's going to see it. She's going to know we went without her. So one of the friends messaged her like, oh, we knew you were studying, so we didn't want to bother you. So, whatever. Yeah. And she responds, LOL or emoji. And I was like, this is like the perfect, very, very insignificant interaction where like, if these friends had this conversation in person, they would have seen she's upset. But because it's through a screen, LOL, smiley face, thumbs up, no problem. And you don't get any nuance. You don't get any human emotion. And people growing up with this like lack of straight up dialogue miss out on a lot of human nuance and body language and communication skills that don't happen just from words. And that's why I think it's like taking a lot longer for your average young adult to mature and develop in the relational elements of their lives, because it's inhibited by all these things that they're not actually allowed, or for at least 2 years, very, very much stalled that maturation process where like we interact in person. So
Right.
I learn, I pick up, I get a nuance, I understand that stink eye means something and that shrug, whatever, I read it. And these are vital skills for healthy relationships. You can't have a healthy relationship without learning how humans interact.
Yeah.
And it's not just letters on a screen.